It is indeed my pleasure to be among the saints of God. It's been, thank you, Stephen Tan and Joy Mon, for inviting me to come in and speak. It's been 10 years and 7 months since the last time I spoke at ICAG. It was in October of 2009 that the last I spoke. So much have happened in between. You guys were the reason why I am who I am, because of the ministry training that I got from ICAG. Now, for the past 2 months, right, due to the pandemic, so many messages are spoken. And I think that we are people that are fortunate enough to listen to so much, and so many visiting pastors, so many local pastors that we listen to. But we need to be careful not to just become listeners of the word, but we need to do what it says. In James 1, verse 22, it says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. It is hard for me to, and for a speaker always to speak when there is no audience that is visible. And I see there is around 48 participants on the call. There is hardly 1, 2, 3, 4 people that I can see. I hope all of you are able to listen to me. And, a speaker always wants to gauge the audience when they speak, whether it is effective or not. But I believe that God has a word, and I see people that have been praying for us that is online, and of all the people, 5 people that prayed, or 6 people that prayed, 5 of them I knew. I do not know who Mary John is. Other than that, I recognize every single voice that prayed. And they have been continuously praying for me, and I know that, and I'm grateful to God for that. I always say this, and I know time is fleeting, but still, there used to be a Wednesday morning prayer in Sister Elsie and Brother Babu's house. For many years, that happened, and the ministry strength that I have gotten was through that meeting. I hope and pray that that still continues, and I pray that many ministers of the gospel will continue to come out of this. 70 days have been passed since the pandemic was declared and a stay-at-home order was declared first in California. Today's statistic, it says nationally there's 1.68 million cases. There is around 98,000 deaths. In Illinois itself, it's 110,304 cases. And there is 4,900 almost deaths, 66 today alone, that coronavirus has infected the people. We are like people without any direction, where to go, where we do not know when the churches will open. We do not know any of these. Were there biblical times like this? Yes. But we need to understand that God has a purpose in everything. And I believe that there is a purpose of God. I know there are people that are suffering and going through all this, but there is a purpose of God that needs to be fulfilled. And I strongly believe that that would be revealed in due time. We do not know the answer to it, but I know that God has an answer and he will reveal it to it. So when I was praying and when Jovan asked me to speak, when he called last Monday, I thought, what should I speak on? And then I thought, it's Memorial Day coming tomorrow. And one of the reasons why I chose what I'm about to speak is on this Tuesday, this last Tuesday. So Dr. Zacharias passed away. And so we pray on Memorial Day for all those people who have laid their lives for the sake of the country, the men and women that served in the Army or in the Air Force or in the Navy or in the Guards. But we lost a general of the Army of God in this week. And I thought that he was of Indian origin, an immigrant like many of us, great apologetic and all those. But in the midst of the crisis of faith and society, his wisdom was sought by presidents, kings, and influential people of the community. So this evening, I thought that what should I take from his life? And so on that day when he passed away, ICPF asked me to write an article about what it meant for ICPF. And while I was researching, I found out 7 distinct characteristics of him that matter to him. And I thought that I will pick some of them. And there were 7 distinct he said character mattered, prayer mattered, calling mattered, identity mattered, truth mattered, intimacy mattered, finishing well mattered. And so I thought that, you know what, I will pick some of them because that matters to us even in today's day and age. In the midst of the pandemic, who we are determines how we are able to handle these circumstances. And I hope and pray that today's message, and I'm only going to pick three, and I don't have the time to elaborate on all of them, but I will pick three, and hopefully I will be able to end it on time, and we will be able to rejoice together at the end. The number one characteristics that he said that character matters. He once said character is definitive in the realm of leadership. It's not simply about being obedient to the claims of God upon your life, but rather determining your very motives and what spurs you to service and action. Now, what does that mean to us? So I always say that, you can speak all the theology you want, but if it doesn't make practical sense, then that theology is of no use, according to me, because that theology has to be practical in each and every one of our lives. So I chose two subjects today for the message that I want to bring. The number one thing is from the life of Joseph in regards to character. And if you look at his life, right, from chapter 37 of Genesis all the way to chapter 45, the way that he handled life was because his character came forth true in everyone's vision. In Genesis 37, he becomes part of a dysfunctional family, right? The father and mother the mother is passed away. The father is there who loves the son because of his affection for his favorite wife. And so the brothers are, angry at him, and they hate it because of his two dreams, the dream of the sheaves and the dream of the sun, moon, and stars. But in the midst of it, character mattered to him because it did not phase it. In Genesis 37, 12 to 36, the brothers hate him. He is almost killed. He goes to being obedient to seek for the brothers who are not there. But there also, even in the midst of it, his character mattered, and he stood for what he believed in. In Genesis chapter 39, he's sold into the Midianites and goes into Potiphar's house. And then what happens? Potiphar's wife tries to take advantage of him. He stood his ground. Why? Because character mattered. In Genesis 40 and 41, in the prison where he still intended to be a help to others, despite his circumstances, and when people did not keep his promises, he still kept on going because character mattered. In Genesis 42 to 45, when he comes in from these brothers comes in into the palace and he gives forgiveness, character matters. So what did we learn? We learned that in all these circumstances, people are imperfect. We can learn to expect some disappointment. But in all these things, if we keep our character, God will let us prove who we are. Because does not matter what people think, but it matters what God thinks. For that character matters. We need to understand that we need to have a high adversity quotient in our relationship. What does that mean? People would be doing whatever they can to us. But in all that midst, we need to be people that love people back, that forgive people, because that will help us to maintain our character. In the midst of circumstances that is adverse to us, that is where our character shows forth. Not in the midst where things are going okay, but when things are going bad. In the circumstances that we are, many are disappointed, some have lost their jobs, some have lost, whatever they thought and held on to, that they thought it as precious. But in the midst of it, if you stand for a principle that you believe that God has appointed you for, your character, if you keep it, God is going to honor you in the right time. Whether it be this life or the life after, but no matter where, your character matters. Put your total trust in Jesus Christ, because Jesus is the only one worthy of our complete trust. So the number one thing that Dr. Zacharias, from his life that I learned is character matters. The second thing that I want to bring today is prayer matters. You know, many churches are having these daily prayers. Some churches are having these weekly prayers. We cannot meet each other. We think that we are far away. Some people said that because we are not gathering together, so there is no church. Absolutely wrong. Church is where your heart is. And the problem with many of us is we have made ourselves to be visible and thinking that church is where the building is. Church is not the building, church is the people. And for that, the fellowship matters because of prayer. Ravi said, I do not believe that one can earnestly seek and find the priceless treasure of God's call without a devout prayer life. That is where God speaks. The purpose of prayer and of God's call in your life is not to make you number one in world's eyes, but to make him number one in your life. We must be willing to be outshone while signing for God. We hear little about being smaller in our own self-estimate. For prayer, we know there are many prayer warriors that is in the scriptures, but I want to bring Daniel into your life. I know everybody talks about Joseph and Daniel, but this matters because there is another problem that Daniel has faced during his time in Babylon. In the initial time when he refused to eat, the initial time when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was put in the fire. And now there is another ordinance that comes in Daniel's life in chapter 6, where he is being asked to bow before this king. And it says in Daniel 6, where verse 9, it says, so King Darius put a decree in writing. And then verse 10, it says, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Prayer mattered to Daniel. Now, in these circumstances, there are so many distractions in our daily life that keep us from prayer. You know how difficult it is to focus on relationship with God. With the Zoom, with all the technology that we have, with all these things, there is so much things that distract us from the presence of God. But according to Daniel, 3 times as usual, he went into prayer. Prayer mattered to Daniel because prayer helped him to honor God. See, as soon as Daniel and his friends were officially entered into the king's service, as they became part of this, but they still did not wish to be part of the king's tantrums or the king's way of life because they wanted to honor God. Prayer should help us to honor God rather than to honor ourselves. You know, sometimes we put a check mark thinking that we did this and did that, and we checked the mark saying that we pray for 24 hours or for 15 minutes or 5 minutes or 5 hours, whatever the number is. But prayer mattered to Daniel because it mattered to honor God. So our prayer should be in such a manner that it will honor God. Number 2, prayer mattered to Daniel because prayer helped him to see God for who he is. See, in today's day and age, there are so many self-help books that people think that can make them to learn about ways of life. You know, I went into Google and searched. According to statistics, there are around $13.5 billion worth of self-help books that were sold in 2019 alone. But we need to understand that when we know who God is, when we understand the character of God, God is able to change the circumstances that we are in. So it is not only to honor God, but we need to also understand who God is. And not only that, prayer mattered to Daniel because prayer helped him to confess his sin and ask for mercy. You know, Daniel says in chapter 6, I prayed to the Lord my God and confessed, oh Lord, you are a great and awesome God. You always fulfill your covenant and keep your promise of unfailing love to those who love you and obey your commandments. But we have sinned and done wrong. We have rebelled against you and scorned your commandments and regulations. We need to understand that to honor him, to know who he is, we need to know who we are and confess our infirmities and our iniquities and our sins in front of him and ask for his mercy that he may wash us and cleanse us. So when we seek his face, when we acknowledge his purpose in our lives and acknowledge Him of who He is and seek for His mercy and confess our sins, He is able to hear our prayers. So the first thing that I said is character matters. The second thing that I said is prayer matters. That we take all those other things out and then come to the last of what I wrote in regards to what mattered to Ravi. Finishing well matters. Ravi said once, beginning well is a momentary thing, finishing well is a lifelong thing. So we all start our journey. And then what a pity it is if we do not end up where we sacrificed everything and saying that we want to reach that destination. So tonight, this is what it is that we need to work on, is to finish well. We do not know when our number is called, that we will finish well. American sharpshooter Matt Emmons went into the final shot of the 2004. He was a sharpshooter. He went into the 2004 Olympics in Greece, only needing to hit the target anywhere near the bullseye to win a gold medal. He lined up his shot. He hit. He squeezed the trigger and watched as he hit the target near the bullseye. And he was so overjoyed, he started to jump. But his jumping was stopped because he realized he did not shoot the right target. It was the neighbor's target that he shot. Instead of winning the gold medal, he went in 8th place. Now, why did I say this? When Joseph was going through his life, he faced his obstacles, his pits to prison, but God's plan remained the same, and he continued on track to be all that God wanted him to be. Now, in chapter 45, and starting in verse chapter 41, but going on to 45, in chapter 41, Joseph makes a pact with God, I believe, in the way that I interpret it, because he did not carry those people that were bothering him, but he made a promise to go on so that he can finish well. Because his dream started 13 years before, and now he's only 17 years old. He says his dream, he comes from dysfunctional family. His brother throws him in a pit and sells him in slavery. He is thrown in jail, all those. But even in the midst of it, he understood that the journey is part of the dream. So if God has given you a vision, if God has given you a dream, there is a journey that is part of it. See, I look back these past so many years that I've been in ministry. So when I left Chicago in 2009, I remember, so many people came in and told us that it was the foolish decision that we were making. And it was true in their eyes, and sometimes in our own eyes, we doubted it. But when we look back into the journey that we came in, the journey is part of the destination that God has placed us. Never forget the destination. Joseph named his 2 sons. One was Manasseh. It means making to forget. Because he says he names him this because God has made him to forget all his trouble in his father's household. Joseph finds healing from God in his misfortunes. See, we have choices. We can say that, this was done to me, that was done to me, I hurt, it's not fair, on and on. People are not treating us right. Or we can seek the healing of God that help us to forget and move on. The second son's name is Ephraim. It means fruitfulness. He says, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Even in hardship, God has blessed me. This is what it is, the truth is. The difficulties, obstacles, and even the betrayals of life are part of the journey to the dream. We all have a story. Every one of us have problems. My problem is not as big as yours, or your problem is not as big as mine. But everyone goes through problems, difficulties, and heartaches. The story that is yet to be written is of fruitfulness if we surrender in the hands of God. Some people feel empowered by misfortune and use it to excuse their sinful behavior. But we should hand it over to God, that God will make something that was miserable to make it that is precious. The second thing that we need to take it from the life of Joseph in regards to finishing well is he extended grace frequently. You know, when Joseph's brothers comes in, he says, now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourself for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. Grace is something that is not deserved, asked for, earned, or paid for. They have given us a free gift of love from our hearts. Grace is more about is more about us than about others. That speaks to the condition of our hearts. Grace is about obedience to God. Grace is about understanding who God is, and grace is also part of the plan. And the last part of finishing well is remember that God's plan is to bless you so you can bless others. You know, one of the beauties of God's plan is they are interconnected. You know, God did not put us all on an island. Our life is all interconnected. So we need to understand that, just as Joseph says, that he knew that God had a plan for him to go through all this, that at the end of the day, that he will become a blessing. You know, when we have the strength, we need to be able to bless others. You know, Matthew 25 has impacted my life so much. The key verse is there, because we say that, you know, what is there for us to help? But there it says, the king says to the people, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Sometimes those people we think are hateful are the people that we need to bless. Those people that we are angry at are the people that we need to bless, because you do to those people that are in need, that will bless us. So, concluding all this, I know because of lack of time, I'm not expanding much about it. Among many lessons from Ravi's writing, 3 things we learned today. No matter what the circumstance we are in, character matters. No matter what the circumstance we are in, prayer matters. No matter what the circumstance we are in, finishing well matters. I learned this by something I saw on a church billboard yesterday. It says, stay alive. And then they expanded the alive part. It says, alive is translated to always living in view of eternity. When we live in view of eternity, then everything that happens, it is because of his purpose and his plan. This also will pass away. These circumstances will go forward. But at the end of the day, if we are able to reach eternity and rejoice in his presence, the small time that we go through all this, it will all fade away. It will all fade away in view of his glory. Let us continue to pray. Let us continue to build each other. Let us build our character, and let us be able to finish well and do things for the cause of the kingdom.